Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Horch Type 1A. This is, as the box says, a German transport vehicle in 48th scale from Tamiya, and I'll try to avoid the fantastic joke I made on stream about how Horch sounds a bit like Sean Connery trying to say horse. Anyway, let's have a look at what's inside the box. We have some very nice, neatly moulded sprues. Tamiya are quite consistent in their quality, and I'm consistent in my praise for it, and I don't say it for the fun of it either. These parts are almost free from mould lines, though that's not to say that there aren't any. They are minimal though. Most of the cleanup you'll have to do here will be where you've cut the parts off the sprues, and if you do that neatly enough, you eliminate most of the effort required for tidying up the parts. I don't really have anything to say about the accuracy of the detail on these parts. After all, I'm not a Horch expert, though I do think it's pretty well detailed. The parts, accurate or not, are very nice, and will fit together with very few, if any, problems. You'll notice there's a few crew figures included with this kit, so if you choose, you can fill your Horch with men, kind of like a Trojan Horch, if you will. The crew figures are fairly good, and this fellow on the left here looks as though he's having a grand old time. However, I won't be using them, as is tradition. The clear plastic parts are good and clear and plastic, also very part. The headlamp lenses are optional, but the windshield is a bit less so. The only problem I have with this kind of windshield is that it's a bit fiddly to paint. Decals are of course included. There's not a huge variety of markings here, but there's enough. There's a decal here for the gauges and stuff on the dashboard, which I think is a nice touch. Much easier than trying to paint that stuff on anyway. We also get this sheet of background information which, as you might assume, has some information on the background of this vehicle. The other side of this page has a paint and marking guide, and this is obviously quite simple as far as painting goes. I think the more helpful thing here is the marking placement. And, so we don't just have to guess at how the parts go together, we get a set of instructions. I have the usual complaint about the large fold-out sheet of instructions here. I think a booklet would be much nicer, but they're clear and functional and I don't have any real problems understanding where the things should go, so I can't complain too much. Let's now use those instructions to glue some bits of plastic together. It's what the glue god would want. We start with the frame, which is this thing here.
Very helpful, Herbert.
I glue these little springy doodads into place here. These are part of the suspension, so it makes sense that there would be one of these on each side for each axle, for a total of 4. Simple enough. Then, axle-y driveshafty parts. I do like that these are single parts rather than a bunch of small bits. They more or less just drop right into place, and there's one of them for each end. Obviously both ends are going to need something to hold wheels and such. They are different parts though, so do be sure that you are using the right ones. I suspect they probably won't really fit if you try to put them on wrong anyway, so maybe just don't. It's much easier that way. Continuing with suspension related bits, these things. I'm not sure what you would call them, but as with the previous parts, there's one for either end, though in this case, these are both identical. On the rear end, I add this. I guess it's just the end of the frame, and not a bumper or whatever, but it does go into place here nice and easily. There's a hole in the center for a towing hook, which I add next. It's probably a good idea to make sure you've got this the right way up, otherwise you're not going to be towing anything, and people will probably laugh at you. Ha ha ha, they'll say, mockingly. Then, on either side, some smaller hooks. These are a little bit fiddly, mostly owing to their size, but nothing too challenging to get into place. Wheels. This vehicle has them, and we need to assemble them. And fortunately, this is a lot easier than making real wheels. You simply glue the inner part into the rest of the wheel. Pretty hard to get this wrong. Though I suppose you could do it wrong by gluing the inner part for the spare wheels into the regular wheels. They are a little bit different after all. It is pretty easy to avoid getting them mixed up, so it's probably not really worth me mentioning. Why not install those wheels now? They go pretty much exactly where you think they should go.
And where's that, Herbert?
On the ends of the axle-y doodads. There is a little bit of play in these parts, so be careful not to stick them on all wibbly-wobbly. You could also put the spare wheels on at this point, but they could get in the way of installing the body, so I just put them aside for now. The instructions didn't even tell me to build those wheels yet. I just did it because I wanted to. Next, it's time to make some seats. We need 2 of these bench seats, I guess you would call them, and they're simple enough to assemble. You just glue the 2 leg things into the bottom of them, and they do go around a particular way, so pay attention to the instructions to get this right. The tabs on the bottom of this are different sizes, so if you put them together wrong, you may have fit issues down the track. The front seats are also a fairly simple affair. You simply glue on those side leggy thingies, and that is pretty easy to do, though it was made slightly more fiddly by my fat fingers being, well, a bit big. I set those aside to bond, and then I add these, which I'm assuming are mud flaps. They go into the little recesses on the mudguards, and there's one of them for each mudguard. Next, I install what seems to be a handbrake. I'm sure the crew would only use this for sensible purposes, and nothing silly. I suppose it makes sense to follow these with gear stick looking things, of which there are 2. This rear wall part goes into place next. This also includes the backrest for one of the seats. Probably the rearmost seat, I would guess. Then, why not install that seat? This is pretty easy, and I'm assuming I got it put together correct earlier because it just plopped right into place in the guide slots on the floor. For the middle seat there's a backrest, which I forgot to install earlier, so I do that now. Why not then also install that seat? This is just as easy as the other one, and it does look rather seat, I'm sure you'll agree. And to stick to the theme, I install the front seats. These also have mounting slots in the floor, and are not at all difficult to install. And there we have it. Enough seats for as many people as you want, as long as you want like 8 people or less in your Horch. Now, the steering shaft. I'm pretty sure last time I built a Tamiya kit, I hecked this up and had to kajigger it in later. This time, I've done it the correct way. The dashboard goes into place next. You can see there's a couple of mounting slots in the top between the 2 pieces for the windshield, which I'm not going to install yet, but that's where it'll go. That assembly can be installed here. There's some little guides for this, like the rear wall had. It does have a little bit of play to it, but it's pretty easy to get into the right position. To hold the passengers in, I add some walls. Are they walls? Sides? Chuzwazzers? Who can say? These parts are shaped such that it should be pretty obvious when they're in the right place. It requires a little bit of care, but it's nothing too difficult. Obviously there's a side for both sides. Makes sense to me. The rear comes next, and it would be easy to put this on a bit misaligned and wrong. It's also very easy not to do that. There's even guides on the inside to help. I glue the frame and body together next, which is pretty straightforward. I put glue on all of the contact points I could find, so it would stay together good and proper. You may find you need to apply some pressure here, and I would suggest being careful when doing this. I mean, it's always good to be careful anyway, but if you press down on the seats here, the supports for them might break. They don't really seem all that strong. Once that's together, I add the top of the rear compartment, I guess you might call it. The fit here is pretty good, though I did have to press down on it a bit to get it to go all the way into place. To get rid of those stinky exhaust gases, I add the exhaust system. This pipe with the muffler goes on here, nice and easy, and the other section of it, where the gases come out, goes here, like so. There are some small recesses in the underside of the floor that these pipe bits should go into. I put the front doors on next, and these more or less just plop right into place. I didn't try it, but it looks like you could probably model these open quite easily. I follow this with the steering wheel, and it's really easy to get into place. Hopefully, that won't get in the way of decal placement for the dashboard when I paint this in about 120 years. On the front left mudguard, I add this. I think this is a little siren. It is a bit fiddly because it is rather small, and I figured adding this before the engine compartment would just make things a little bit easier. And then, why not install said engine compartment? I figured the most sensible way to do it was by starting with the radiator, which goes on the front here nice and easy. I follow that with the side parts. The radiator part and the front of the cabin act as guides for this. To hide the scandalous fact that this Horch has no engine, and thus no horsepower,
Oh, stop it, Herbert!
I add the bonnet, or hood, or whatever they call it in German. As you can see, this pretty much drops right into place. The front bumper comes next, and this has a little bar thingy along the top of it with the license plate attached to it. It's nice and simple to install this. Please insert very clever and original joke about axing questions here. This axe has 2 mounting points, and it's rather easy to get them into place. That's not the only tool the Horch carries. There are 8 seats after all. Also, it gets a shovel, which goes on here at a nice jaunty angle. I put the headlamps together next, and with these you get the choice of either clear lenses or blackout covers, whatever you might call them, which are obviously not clear, and I chose those. I also assemble the no-tech light. This requires the top part to be glued onto the pole part, I guess you would call it. It does have some play to it, so you'll have to nudge it a bit to get it nice and straight, but it's not especially challenging. It seemed like a good idea to install that right here on the front left mudguard. Then, the front headlamps.
As opposed to the rear headlamps, Herbert?
Installing these lights is easy enough, though of course you may need to do the traditional nudging to get them to sit nice and straight, but it is better to do that than have weird lopsided lights, right? On the front right mudguard, I'm reasonably sure this is just a wire cutter. It goes here like so. Then we need to install these brackety do-for-whatsits. I think the right one has a little searchlight on it, and the left one has a rear view mirror. There are mounting recesses for both of these, and they are a little bit fiddly to get on nice and straight, but again, a little bit of nudging makes everything better. The spare wheels come next, and these have a sort of key-shaped keying on them, so they only go on in a particular way, for some reason. Like the other wheels, there is a bit of play in these, so make sure you've got them on as straight and neat as you can. Next, there's a couple of little hooks that go on the front bumper, like so. I'm pretty sure these were meant to go on earlier, but I must have forgotten them or missed them. Better late than never though, as the youth of today say. On the rear deck, whatever you would call this, we install the canvas roof. It would be nice if there was a deployed version of this too, but there isn't. Anyway, this is comprised of 4 parts. 2 central bits, and 2 outer parts. It wasn't immediately obvious to me how all of this should go together, particularly the middle bits, but with some fiddling and some nudging, I got it all together fairly decently. It could probably do with a bit of sanding and maybe some putty before painting, just so that it looks really good, but it's not a big deal, and it does look fine as it is. The ball-on-stick width marker devices come next, and these are pretty simple to install, though if they're not perfect, we can always claim battle damage. Finally, I add the windshield. I'm not gluing this into place just yet because 1. The plastic cement will almost certainly cause it to fog up, and B. Having this removable means I won't need to mask anything when it comes time to paint. Fortunately, the windshield will just sit there, at least until you turn the vehicle over. Anyway, the Horch, German transport vehicle in 48th scale by Tamiya, is now completed.
Yeah, completed. Except for those poor crew members.
Nuts to them. It probably won't surprise anybody when I say that I like this kit and think it's rather good. These Tamiya kits are consistently good. Not only is the result quite nice, but the build itself is also consistently good and enjoyable. The parts are neat and go together very well with minimal cleanup. That obviously makes these kits nice, fun, and stress-free builds. Of course, I do understand that sometimes a challenge in modelling is desirable, but not always. I'm sure there are more detailed Horch kits available, and if you are looking for extreme detail, those might be a better choice for you. But while not super detailed by any stretch, I do feel like this model is fairly well detailed. Enough for most people's needs anyway. I might be waffling a bit now, because I don't really have a whole lot to say about this that you can't either figure out by looking at the model, or that I already said earlier in the video. So, if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you'd like to watch me build kits like this one live on stream, as well as make fantastic and not at all terrible jokes, head over to my Twitch channel, which is where I stream. The link is in the description below. If you've not already done so, why not subscribe here on YouTube? It doesn't cost anything, and it's great. Or if you have the means and you want to help a Herbert Erpaderp do Herbert Erpaderp things, as well as see my videos a bit early before there's any ads, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon and all my other things like Discord and social media in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. Farewell.